Hi, I'm Mikey, and this is Tyler, and we are the founders of Innovative Start Organization. Our organization is in educating financial literacy to students, young adults, and anybody who's just listening or trying to start their financial literacy journey. And then our goal is to educate, not persuade. And yeah, we got a couple of topics to go over today. Know we've been on hiatus for a minute, but we're gonna jump back into it. One of the most important things than some of the other topics that we've talked about, which is around savings and budgeting and going back into some of those kind of frameworks of just better overall financial um, or informing yourself as far as like what you can do as best practices. Now, within a budgeting aspect or an investing aspect, we'll take a look at compound interest. Um, I think when a lot of people think of compound interest, or if you know what it is, basically in definition or simplicity, is the interest that is earned, right? Doubles every single time that you leave it into that interest-bearing account. I feel like if you don't understand what interest is or whatever else, you just need to go back to the basics of understanding that until you get to the point of, okay, this is compound interest. Um, Trying to see like I think most savings accounts, like high yield savings accounts, work on a compound kind of interest basis. The way you invest, depending on what you're investing in, can be also compound interest. Um, and then yeah, interest in general too is just, you know, that specific percentage amount that once you put your money into that, that's how much it's going to grow. And then basically you just double or whatever that is if you leave that interest bearing account and you keep adding into it. There's also some other aspects of investing. But Tyler, I'm gonna pass it to you on your thoughts and what compound interest means to you as far as like your own personal definition.
Yeah, it's go along with what you said. Essentially, I think it'd be good. What it really helped me understand this concept was in class whenever my professor showed me a visual. So I recommend anyone go on YouTube and just look up a visual of compound interest and go from there. I think it's a really powerful tool. So you have a high yield savings account. You get the way that mine works. It's you get paid out monthly. So then, let's say I earn $1 on the amount I had saved, then that dollar will be added to my full amount, and then the interest will start over again on that dollar, and then just keeps compounding. And so it's a really important concept. Most of the time, it's talked about in terms of savings accounts.
Hmm.
So essentially, it's the way that I look at it is just money that's building on itself to make it very easy.
Yeah.
But again, some of these topics are so complex, or they make them seem so hard to understand. A YouTube visual is probably the biggest thing that I recommend people
Yeah.
go look at.
I would say like I said, if you basically like, right, you put $1 in and your interest is say 5% or something like that. So you're basically earning pennies on that dollar. And then every single time, whether it's on a monthly basis that it compounds the interest, quarterly basis, which is every 3 months, half a year, that those exist, but then and then you have like a year maybe where it does that. So essentially what happens is that you will earn interest on that initial dollar invested plus the interest earned, right? And so that'll go back in. So then now you have $1 and some change that you're now earning interest on. And then say if you put more money in there or whatever. So your principal amount is whatever you put in that is not your interest, right? Whether you put that money in as a one-time like issue or you're putting in money every month, that builds onto your principal amount. Now, the compound interest and the other interest that comes in is the money earned on top of that principal. So again, now say you're up to $100, right? And you're still getting that 5%. So at that 5%, I think it'd be $5, right, Tyler? You'll be getting $5
Yep.
on top of that 100, right? And so now you're earning interest on $105. And so then you'll get that 5% on that 105. And then that's the compound interest working in. And then it'll go keep going and keep going. So then if you add in, however much plus your interest on top of that, and then you'll be getting interest on but
Yeah. And
it's
that's one thing to note, sorry to cut you off, is the time. This is
mhm,
where I get confused all it's so frequently it's just the time of the percentage. So some people may say 5% over a year. If it's 5% in 1 month, then you need to
mhm.
tell me where you're getting that at right now. But it's important to know it's most of the time. So if it's 5% each year, you have to do that 5% divided by 12, and that's most of the time what you'll make within a month. If, just depending on the the time frame it's on.
Yeah.
So
So if you do like a high yield savings account, which at best you can get 5% on the year, um, that is like what you're looking at. So if you put 1,000 in, then you can expect $50 or something like that being added on as your interest-bearing account. But mind you, right, it's your principal plus the interest that's being compounded on. The same thing works if you invest in the stock market. You do an ETF that does about 10%, so like an S&P or whatever, and then that returns about 10%. So at the end of the year, you'll get your 10% of growth, and then on top of that, you'll get your extra 10%. So then that's where like dollar cost averaging and other aspects of like investing goes and plays its part in. Same thing you can do, I guess, with your individual savings account. But it's important to understand how interest works. That way you can calculate, how much money you would like to put in, as far as like your goals as savings go, or how wherever you want to be at monetary wise. But I think those are some really good points, especially if you're looking at a budgeting aspect. Maybe you want to have enough interest built up so that you take out a certain amount of money for vacation or, a home expense that you've been trying to save money for or whatever the case may be. Extremely important to just to understand interest, compound interest, understanding what a principal amount is. Again, that's the base amount that you put in, and then it starts earning its interest, and then that money plus the interest, and then the next interest is the compound kind of part. But a, a simple but complicated topic, I would say, as far as like you would really need to see it visually to better understand it, most likely, versus how we're putting it in words, I would say for sure. But what kind of leads me into, another aspect of investing or putting your money to the side, which is diversification. So any person that you talk to, whenever, investing comes around or whatever, they'll say like, oh, don't put all your, I think, even the saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? What you would want to do as far as like an investing standpoint. And one of the things I was told whenever it's time to get into investing was like, just put your money into things that you buy every day or like companies that you feel like you're interested in, right? And so I was like, oh, like I'll put my money into some Nike. I'll put my money into like, Apple or something like that because I have a iPhone or whatever. Which is like decent information as far as trying to explain to somebody who doesn't invest. It gives you kind of a mindset of, I own these things, and then you also own, ownership as far as like the stock goes. Um, but from another standpoint, that's also causing you to diversify, right? Those are two different sectors. You have one in the more technology space and one in the more retail clothing space. And then those will trend and like be different based on who their competitors are and whatnot. But what helps you out is that if you were invested in one type of stock, anytime that stock, went up or down, that's your whole portfolio, right? So you won't have anything that'll mitigate certain economic risk, right? So say the tariffs or anything else like that, that may have an overall impact, but you don't know what other factors impact the technology market versus the, I guess, clothing industry or whatever market as far as that goes. And having that diversification can help you as far as maybe tariffs are not impacting one side or not. or say like certain aspect within that product. So say the iPhone or say a t-shirt, right? If one of them requires a resource that's more expensive and or they have a more innovative side, you'll see that stock go up. Maybe the other side has some type of economic downturn as far as like the production of the material within the shirt goes down. Now you have that stock going down. That mitigates and keeps you at a more floated standpoint of not being one too deep in the hole or maybe having a lot of stocks in your portfolio to help you as far as like I said mitigate certain risk aspects of different types of stock. But that's like my viewpoint on it. Tyler, what do you think about that?
That's good. Kevin O'Leary, the Shark Tank guy,
Hmm.
uh, he's big on diversification. Again, we're here we're here to inform, not persuade. That's what we say a lot at ISO. So there's a lot of different theories. Diversification is just one way that we think you should know and have the option.
Hmm.
If you have, all of your money invested in one single stock and that single stock, some news breaks tomorrow that nobody knew about the CEO or something crazy happened, well, there's all your money going down and however much it decreases. Um, on the flip side, though, if that stock does a huge run up, that's also a benefit as well because all your money's in there. But diversification, if for whatever reason one stock decreases for whatever reason and you have other investments, um, you won't be hit as hard, if that makes sense. So something I would look into. Another way to think about this is with your career as well, diversifying. If you're like, if we're younger, so a lot of people are going into startups and things like that, which is great. If you are at an AI startup, maybe your money should not be invested in another AI startup or an AI company in the stock market. Maybe you should diversify something maybe a little bit less risky, depending on how big the startup is, because then you'll be gambling your salary and then also you're gambling your investments. But that's like a whole nother thought of diversification as well.
Hmm.
If you're invested in real estate, some people say don't invest in one specific neighborhood.
Hmm.
You know, try to invest in different neighborhoods just in case something happens. For example, there's a new plant that wants to be built down the street from my house. If you owned a bunch of properties around where that plant is trying to be built, well, that's going to decrease all the values of your properties because they're all in the same area. So
Hmm. Yeah.
it's my
Diversification.
my two cents.
No, that's really good. I would say diversification, like it's broadly not just investing, but like Tyler saying, like just your career wise, like there's a lot of aspects which you can think of diversification, right? Um, like even in the most simplest terms, imagine if you got the same T-shirt, right? Okay, now say you need to dress for a different type of occasion or anything like that, and you only have one type of t-shirt, now you're just, you're out of luck as far as like being able to brand yourself in another way or being able to pivot in another sense. Same thing goes with stocks. If you own one stock and then that stock just drops down and you don't have anything else, now look at what you are. And then going into the real estate perspective, right? If bought a plot, land, um, apartment complex or whatever, right? And now some industrial aspect comes into play, and you'll have families that are like, oh, I don't want to live next to this, you know, plant or whatever factory or whatever. It's too noisy or whatever. Now your property value is going down because you've only invested in that one aspect. When really you should be, across town. I got properties here, 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 right? So at any aspect that one thing takes a hit, you have something else that can absorb that hit essentially with your diversification. So yeah, I would look at it that way. Like, okay, you have one part that can take another part in case, but that risk diversification helps a lot. Because you can be in low risk stocks and high risk stocks. Maybe you are somebody who wants to develop around that plant because maybe that plant might need to expand, right? That's a more high risk, high reward because you're not fully committed on the fact that it will, but there might be the case that it is, and you might be decreased at that point for a later return that you might see in the future. And then your low risk properties are going to be those ones maybe near a school or something like that, um, a house or a duplex or a condominium or whatever that is that you know will always have some type of return value on it. Now, it might not be the highest return value, but it's something that'll mitigate, that high risk, high reward aspect of your investments. But yeah, I think that Tyler put that well as far as giving you an analogy of another way to diversify. But yeah, and career diversification is extremely important too. Um, but yeah, so diversification and then also learning about compound interest as far as it goes, especially if you are diversifying you know, your portfolio or whatever it is that is in need of your investing aspect. But I would say look at it as far as, okay, what am I invested in? Do I feel like this is a high risk type of stock? So maybe you might be invested in something like Tesla or something like that, where it's up and down, right? Versus something that's more so stagnant. You're not seeing a lot of growth, but it has a decent return over the year. So an ETF of some sort. That would be your diversification standpoint. And most ETFs are already diversified. So they'll have ETFs that are mostly tech stocks, or they'll have ETFs that are a little blend of both. Um, they'll have an ETF that's more so just like top performers. But those are ways that you can be diversified without having to buy individual stocks. Because you can do the same thing that it's doing. It's just a one, makes it easier for whatever consumers getting ready to buy that stock. More on ETFs and stuff. We'll probably talk about that in a later segment. But extremely important to look up these things that we talk about and inform yourself on them as well. Going into our next topic, though, which I feel like is becoming more and more popular every day, is the buy now, pay later. You also know this as probably, is it Klarna or Klarna? I don't know how you pronounce that. And then also Affirm. And other like third party options, but basically a buy now, pay later gives you the option to basically break up the payments of that over a period of time. This is something that's always existed. I think it just has like this name for it now, but financing, right? When you buy a car, that's basically a buy now, pay later. You're getting that car now and paying over time, small increments until you get up to that certain point. Uh, Buy now, pay later is it has its, I guess, certain aspects, in my opinion, as far as being helpful and not helpful, right? One thing that I was told when I was younger is like if you don't have the money to afford it, then maybe you don't need it. And that's always a good rule of thumb. If you can't debit that money out with actual cash, then it's chances are that you shouldn't be trying to buy that or putting it on that plan. Some of the craziest stories I've heard with buy now, pay later is DoorDash and food. Um, what else have I heard? I've heard of some other aspects of things that I'm just like, that are 15, $20. Does that really need to go on a buy now, pay later, plan? And if you don't have that 15, $20, maybe we need to try to pivot. Now I can't speak on everybody's financial situation, but in my opinion, if it's a buy now, pay later, it needs to be for a larger sum. That I know I could afford later, but just not at the moment, and is an absolutely need, not a want. But yeah, informing yourself, especially on some of the risk with buy now, pay laters, is that most times, depending on the amount too and the company that's offering you, that there is some interest that is involved with that. So think about it this way, right? If you're breaking up a payment that you feel like you could pay at one go, you just don't want that taken out of your check. So you say, oh, let me do a buy now, pay later, right? You'll end up paying interest, so you'll pay more for what you wanted to buy instead of just buying it outright. That's another thing to think of. So if you absolutely know necessarily that you can't afford that large the buy that you're looking to do, and you're like, okay, let's do that. That interest that's put on there is going to should make or shape, the way that you go about that. But those are just my 2 cents on it. Tyler, what about you?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I mean, I don't know about you, but I want things here now. I want it
Mm,
immediately. I want certain shoes and stuff or whatever immediately. I I don't personally I don't think some interest is bad for
Mm-hmm.
larger purchases like a home and things like that because obviously it's harder to have a couple $100,000 saved up, whatever. My concern as a society is we're starting to do these buy now pay later things for just like you said, door dashing, shoes, things like that. And the interest on these things are it's not single digit interest. These are double digit interest platforms from what I understand, unless they've changed since the last time I've been reading about them. So, and that could be the case. It just does not, and it sounds like there's some pretty hefty fees
Mm-hmm.
whenever you do not. If you miss a payment, it sounds like it's pretty crazy. So I don't know. I think we just need to get away from the sexy Instagram finance influencer, everything immediately thing.
Mm-hmm.
Some good things, it just takes a while. It may take a while to save up for some shoes you want or a car
Mm-hmm.
you want or whatever. And I think that's okay. That's normal. My concern is we're getting so weighed down financially and honestly, mentally. I think being in debt does play a mental part on things. Um, to where we have no wiggle room.
Mm-hmm.
If all our money is just going straight towards payments, I think that's a concern. What is the stat? Like something like 30 or 40% of Americans do not have $1,000 saved.
It's
Like I think we need to start there.
and to kind of like piggyback off of that, like the the main concern is that if you're coming from a lower socioeconomic background as far as like maybe your family's not making what is considered a livable wage, right? It's harder to have the ability to save for your future. So it's always an uphill battle, right? You're just fighting for the next day, or it's more of a survival standpoint, um, to just order to just do day-to-day functions, which that buy now, pay later option helps because maybe it gives you a chance to afford something that you need for your family or to survive that next day, for the chance to maybe pay it back next week or whatever, whenever you get your paycheck. Because you go, oh, you know what? I don't have the money now, but I get paid next week. That's fine if that gets taken out. And that's my bet, like, in my opinion, like I said, best use case of a buy now, pay later. Um, because if you're in that circumstance, that's probably like the best thing that could ever happen to you, right? Before, when you didn't have buy now, pay later, like you were stressing. You're gonna be like, oh, I can't get it, I can't afford it. It's not gonna happen. I'm getting paid bi-weekly or every month, and I'm itching by, right? If only there was a way to, you know, pay for it, now essentially, but over time, finish that payment off whenever I get my paycheck, knowing that I can pay that off. But that's not how most people use it. But that's what I feel like is where it kind of stemmed from, or probably how it was pitched, originally. But understanding like that the main factor that goes into that is how can you manage money? How do you pull yourself up out of, that certain status that you are, from a that socioeconomic background, and then propel yourself forward. Now, it is not going to be the easiest slope, right? It's going to be that up and down there until you get to the mountaintop. But essentially, what you have to look at is a long-term, um, outlook for it. So all the decisions, monetary based, that you make now, will that impact the future you? And again, you might be somebody that's living paycheck to paycheck or barely living paycheck to paycheck, right? And that buy now, pay later helps you out a lot. That makes the most sense. Most definitely utilize those resources to you. If you're somebody who has the ability to save your money and not do buy now, pay later options, you're just doing it because maybe, that's how you want to think of it as a credit. It really is. You're getting credited that, amount to go ahead and do that. But that is basically what you're doing is it's another credit extension, another predatory way to put you in the hole or dig a hole that you probably wouldn't, even standing in. So, pay attention to things like that whenever you're thinking about your financial future. Think about use case scenarios, short term, long term, If it's DoorDash and food, you probably don't need that at that moment, right? But say like, hey, it's a new AC unit for your house or something like that. Now that makes sense. And most times, most companies offer financing internally. Have seen some larger companies use these, third party options like Affirm, Klarna, and I'm sure there's going to be some other ones that pop up. It is not lucrative for certain businesses to do it on their own most times is because they have to chase that money down, so they use these third party options. I think Apple had one before they switched over. Apple had their own internal one, and then they were just like, people are not paying their money back, right? Which should have been a clear cut scenario because it's the same way as a credit card works. You're buying it now on that credit card only to pay that credit card later off, however much amount. So look at it that way. It's the same way. The buy now, pay later option is the same way as you'll be using the credit card. If you can bring those two together as one, you'll understand the overall financial impact of using that buy now, pay later option. But yeah, like I said, it's good. I'll say one good use. Um, we need a new AC in my grandma's house. Put that on a firm, paid it off over time, and it was the difference of paying, I think it was like 3,500 up front, versus a few hundred over a year base, and then the interest was minimal. That is optimal for that, right? Get that AC unit in now, especially if summer's about to hit, have that working for you, and then pay it off because that's a hefty price in a purchase, and that's a need, not a want, right? But if I was like, yeah, let me get this new gaming console or something like that, I don't really need that. I can hold off on that. And the thing is that you can afford it on your next paycheck, and you need it at that moment. As far as like, it's not something that you need at that exact moment, right? Why not just wait? So I get that people be like, oh, FOMO and oh, I need it right now and all of that stuff. But like, if you just wait, you're putting yourself in a better financial situation than extending yourself for credit. And then people be like, where all this money getting taken out of my paycheck? Or why does Apple keep charging me? Or where am I getting these? Yeah. And oh, I see people, they got like 4 or 5 different transactions that pop up all at one time because they put everything on buy now, pay later. Like, and they're like, where all my money go? That's where it would have went if you would have paid with it all at one time. But yeah, that's just like I said, like my 2 cents on that whole thing. I think it's a great thing. It has its pros and its cons, just on how you use it, but just be smart about um, these different like financial tools that you can use, in my opinion. But yeah. Anything else from you? Any additional pointers?
I say, yeah, it's such an individual basis as well. I think you hit that. I think that's a perfect point you make.
Hmm.
Um, I do say, you will save money cooking at home if you have the time and the resources and the space to do that. It may not be fun, but eating, rice and beans and chicken or whatever, it'll get old, but over time, can speak for both of us. We've been in some unfortunate situations growing up, but it's just been cool how we've stuck to it and where we're at now personally. So we're we are living testimonies, I guess, to that. To be very honest with everyone. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. But yeah, to wrap up, I know we talked about a few different things. But overall, like when it comes to your financial future, look at taking that sacrifice up front so that you can better yourself in the future. Your future self will thank you for those sacrifices that you made. I get a lot of times people like, it doesn't have to be that way. Why the economy and all those external factors that you have no control over, you can complain about them, but it's not going to make a difference in your life. And I feel like that might be a slight boomer take, but at the same time, like if you want to better yourself, you have to make a certain sacrifice. It's not going to be given to you at any time. You just have to go out there and take it or make those options for yourself. And I think, again, like if people make those certain sacrifices for yourself in that moment, right, instead of, trying to find some type of escape option or, a blame game option, you'll be better in yourself. Focus on yourself, focus on your financial future. You'll be able to help yourself and others by doing so. And like I said, And like Tyler said, those are testimonials just from us in general too, as far as like some of our backgrounds of growing up and things that we focused on, things that we seen. It's highly, highly, highly important that you really, really stress those, I guess, financial aspects of your future because that will determine, all the other things that can be impacted by financial instability. But yeah, we appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment if you have anything about buy now, pay later, or just compound interest, learning about that in general, and diversification. Let us know, like, what are some of your strategies. We appreciate you guys for tuning in and catch us next time. See ya.